I proclaimed. I am leaving this place, okay? Then there is no need to bother coming back. My wife responded with a shot. Whenever I stormed out of the room, I would normally yell out, "Go to hell," but today, I wanted to make sure that my parting comments were more courteous. We have hurled similar insults over the course of our 14 years of marriage, but I will not be going back on my word this time. 1 or 2 days from now, she will understand what I meant by this round. My wife Jenna has become a verbal wrecking ball during the course of the approximate half year that has passed. I struggled to understand it. To put it quite gently, her jabs were painful. In order to prevent things from reaching a boiling point, I began to avoid her. Every day I would wait in the car for a longer period of time. After Jenna and Carrie, our 13-year-old daughter, had eaten their meal, I would occasionally sneak back to my house. It was necessary for me to look for myself. On occasion there would be remaining food. In recent times, however, it appears that they have disappeared before I return. This is my name, Kurt Kaminsky. Technically, my name is David Kurt Kaminsky, however, my grandfather is also a David, so they decided to nickname me Kurt right from the beginning in order to avoid any mistake. Yes, you are not a junior. I am David John Kaminsky, my father. I am at a loss to understand why he missed the junior portion. Junior or even DJ would be a great person to answer to. But no, it's only Netta or Kurt to do it. Indeed, I am of Polish descent. An American who has Polish ancestry, to be more specific. All of the jokes were heard. Nevertheless, the majority of them continue to produce new ones on an annual basis. Due to the fact that I am the only Pole I am familiar with in this town, that is a perfect score of 0-0, I have become the punchline. In a manner of speaking, I am half Polish. German, French, Irish, and English cultures make up the other half of the family on mom's side. Nevertheless, I am a Pole because I am a Kaminsky. My soon-to-be ex-wife is not who I had imagined she would be. It wasn't until 4 weeks ago that I became aware of this. As I mentioned earlier, I was avoiding her because of the inappropriate behavior. On a Monday evening, after failing to show up for a couple dinners, I went to a diner. Just as I was getting ready to place my order, I overheard 2 guys talking in the booth next to mine. A phrase was caught with Pole, and I tuned into it. "So, how long have you been a member of the Paulus Mrs. family? When did they finally tie the knot?" Heck, I even slept with her on the day of their wedding, and he had no idea what I did. Unknown was the first voice. But I was familiar with the second one. George Carey, my closest best friend. I became numb. Their babbling continued. On the other hand, I didn't hear anything until George finally said, "Yeah, we get together at least twice a month." As a result of Kurt's complete lack of knowledge, he is not any wiser. It's just dumb luck. At that precise moment, the waitress arrived to take my order. I mumbled in a low voice, "I'm sorry, I got a jet." At the same time, I made sure that they did not see me by running away. My mind was just unable to comprehend it. My wife Jenna, along with my best friend, the individual that was there for me when I was at the altar. In addition to that, he is my go-to mechanic, and that is not going to change anytime soon, to be more precise. Not my official mechanic. I consider them to be more of an exclusive contractor that I rely on completely to check and repair all of my vehicles. I am the proprietor of a used vehicle dealership, in case you were wondering. Yes, I am a salesman for second-hand automobiles. The jokes and insults were all heard by him. Now, however, commerce is thriving. They have faith that they are getting high-quality automobiles at reasonable prices, and if any concerns spring up, I handle them. George has always been a top-quality mechanic, and I keep him busy and paid well. I wanted to bring him on as staff, but he cracked a joke about not valuing himself if he worked for a Pole. But I thought he meant it. Despite this, I hired him as an independent contractor, despite the fact that he wasn't exactly a very autonomous person. Actually, I was his only source of income, and the fact that he relied on me will prove to be his undoing. I left the diner and drove around the neighborhood, having my doubts about what I had heard. Is it true, or was he just boasting about it? They might have hired a private investigator, but if what he stated was true, their meetings were few and far between, so it could have been a waste of money. Nevertheless, I made the decision to look through her email and phone. At home, Jenna was the same person she always was. It's fine with me. If I was going to talk to her, I needed to know the truth. I took a look at her email after she had fallen asleep. No dirt, even though her phone was locked. I was able to unlock it in a short amount of time by using the date of our daughter's birth. No communications from George were discovered, but there were a few suspicious ones. In light of the fact that he was my friend, his name and her contacts were not strange. I thought to myself that perhaps he was simply talking trash. But her recent actions gave the impression that something was wrong. Not necessarily with George, but with another individual. Feeling uneasy, I went to bed. I finally fell asleep at a time that was after 2:43 in the morning. The dealership was open the following day. George made his customary jokes about Polish culture. Usually I am able to let them slip, but today I finally snapped. To be honest, George, how much do you know about Poland? I bet that even if your life depended on it, you would not be able to locate it on a map. It's funny that you make fun of Poles being dim, but I'm sure they could find the United States of America, and maybe even our state. Get to work right away. In a state of utter silence, George looked, and he was aware that I was onto something. Instead of being a student, he was more street smart and skilled with motors. He was not the kind to read textbooks. I suppose it is the reason why we hung out during our time in high school. In order to ensure that he graduated, I would assist him with his academics. Now, I'm having second thoughts about our friendship. He prompted me to consider selecting a partner for my life. After that, I went back to my office, closed the door, and thought about how I could start gathering evidence. It wouldn't be a good idea to confront both of them head-on. Simply put, they would disregard it. I needed evidence that was beyond doubt. I called a private investigator in Santa Fe and explained my concerns to them. Given that they only sometimes got together, he estimated that keeping an eye on them would be somewhat expensive. It is possible to install a tracker on her mobile device. At the very least, you will be aware of its whereabouts if you check it or by installing cameras in your home. On the other hand, unless they are pricey and of the highest quality, it is highly possible that they will be discovered. Even if you don't have any expensive gear, she will undoubtedly figure it out if she is awake. If I were you, I would tag her phone and perhaps capture them in the act of committing the crime. The price was waived in exchange for his suggestion of a tracking program. Just think of it as a freebie, he advised. However, you came through with some helpful advice despite the fact that everything I told you is already available online. I contended that you should foresee receiving a check. He recommended that you visit Kaminsky's lot whenever you are in Silver City. I responded by stating that I do not frequently venture out in that direction, however. I will ensure that I locate you if I do. It was evident to me that he intended it. My success in sales was significantly influenced by my ability to make individuals feel valued. At the outset, I learned that individuals are perpetually seeking validation. I opted to utilize the tracking software, rather than spending money and squandering time on the camera's Genomite spot. I crept up on her in the middle of the night, while everyone else was asleep, and installed the tracking app on her phone, synchronizing it with mine. She is unaware that it will persist in its operation in the background. I have at last experienced a restful night's slumber. The following day, I continued to supervise the application at my place of employment. Jenna was employed as a part-time employee at the university bookshop, where she labored for 15 to 20 hours per week. She referred to her earnings as mad money and proceeded to the salon to squander them all. She visited the supermarket and subsequently returned to her residence. George remained at home for the majority of the day, however. When Jenna was present, he was preoccupied with his work. Consequently, I was under the impression that no significant events had transpired, at least on the day in question. I endeavored to be more amicable with my wife and daughter the following evening by proposing that we dine out. My wife appeared to be somewhat responsive. My daughter, who is a typical adolescent, was initially hesitant, but I persisted. The dinner was a success. The casual mention of George caused Jenna to fidget uncomfortably and abruptly alter the topic, which only served to strengthen my suspicions. I am interested in determining the credibility of George's assertions. One way or another, I must resolve this issue. Unlike my customary behavior, I refrained from inspecting her phone that evening. I made numerous attempts to track her calls or texts, but I was ultimately ineffectual. It is possible that she either purged them promptly or did not create any at all. I expressed my gratitude to Jenna for her assistance upon retiring to bed. We are grateful for your attendance at our dinner. I appreciate it, Kurt. She acknowledged that it was a delightful surprise and returned my gaze. Tonight may prove to be a fortunate evening for you. It has been a considerable amount of time. Nevertheless, as I previously mentioned, our relationship has been strained of late. After completing her evening routine in the restroom, Jenna sat down next to me and felt at ease. I experienced a variety of emotions when it came to the possibility of establishing a closer relationship with her. Is it conceivable that I would have desired for her to be unfaithful? I decided to allow her to take the lead until I had more concrete evidence. I would not be the one to attempt it. In fact, we did end up participating in some physical activity, however, it was nothing extraordinary. It is unnecessary to enter into specifics. I found it to be at least somewhat entertaining. I did not observe any unusual activity while monitoring her phone's location throughout the week. While she was asleep on Saturday night, I examined her phone to determine whether there were any messages or calls, but I was unsuccessful in my search. At one juncture, I was on the brink of convincing myself that George was fabricating his narrative. making an effort to captivate an individual with his anecdotes of triumphs and victories. This was not the first instance of him doing so that I had observed since we were in school together. I was once again unable to fall unconscious in bed due to my subconscious's refusal to allow me to remain asleep. At 2 a.m., as I lie there, unable to fall asleep, I was unable to stop gazing at the ceiling. In the expectation that it would facilitate my relaxation, I resolved to descend the stairs to obtain a beverage. At that moment, I resolved to verify it once more, as I was seated with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other. I navigated to the main page of her phone and initiated it. I was suddenly struck by something akin to a bolt of electricity. The date of our daughter's birth was of great significance. Jenna endured an ordeal as an expectant woman. We were apprehensive about losing her on numerous occasions due to the issues. The baby was denied by her body due to an issue with her Rh factor not matching Jenna's. Jenna was obligated to remain in bed for the final 3 weeks of her pregnancy to guarantee that the infant would be delivered without experiencing any complications. In reality, Carrie was born exactly 9 months after we had finalized our marriage. We were delighted to discover that she was in excellent health. It was evident that she was a youthful person who was quite demanding. She was unable to suppress her emotions, experienced difficulty falling or remaining asleep, and struggled with nursing. The journey was arduous. In the second year of Carrie's life, Jenna made a firm commitment that we would stop having children. I must be honest, the baby had significantly diminished the pleasure we had been experiencing in our lives. I referenced the fact that she was born 9 months after our nuptials. These children are referred to as wedding night babies because they are born on the night of the wedding or during the honeymoon of the couple. I was abruptly struck by a sudden flash of insight. There was a substantial likelihood that Jenna was already pregnant if George's claims were accurate. Jenna was administering the pill prior to the night of our nuptials. We did not delay our physical engagement until we were married. It was a critical factor in the development of our relationship. The physician posited that the tension of the wedding may have disrupted her hormones, resulting in the tablets being rendered ineffective. It is probable that the tablets were fruitless that day, as they were unsuccessful that evening. I am cognizant of my actions at this juncture. There is also a 50-50 chance that I am not the father. Are you acquainted with the adage, the early bird gets the worm? George may have been an early riser, however. It seems that the early bird has the fruit in this instance. I proceeded to the restroom after leaving the SETI, where I encountered a few cotton swabs. Carrie was soundly asleep in the chamber in which she was located. She had successfully established a healthy sleeping regimen at the age of 4. Up until that point, it had been a struggle. She lay there, her lips open, snoring continuously. The procedure of gently swabbing the inside of her cheek with a Q-tip was both quick and simple. She did not emit any audible noise. I repeated the process for myself after I had completed placing it in a plastic bag. Despite the possibility that Carrie was my biological daughter, Jenna's devotion was called into question in the event that she was not. However, I reserved those concepts for future investigation. This was a day for household chores, and each of us had our own duties. I took my time and refrained from engaging with Jenna and Carrie in order to maintain my emotional equilibrium. I was anxious to confirm my apprehensions, however. I was tormented by uncertainty for the duration of the day. I responded, I am planning to purchase a large number of cars at the upcoming auction to replenish the inventory. Money may be scarce until I generate some revenue. She cautioned me against overextending myself, and she consistently referred to the business as ours, despite the fact that it was actually mine. Jenna inquired, Kurt, what are you contemplating? In order to protect my personal finances, I would establish it as a distinct entity. I belonged to a religious organization and was concerned that the decisions made in my business would have a detrimental effect on my personal life. I informed her that I was contemplating the possibility of paying off all of our credit cards and maintaining only one of them in order to improve our credit score. In the event that she later discovered my method, I employed this strategy to obscure it. Adhere to your own assessment. She responded with a casual demeanor. I was suddenly struck by the concept in a spark. Your intellect is capable of achieving remarkable feats when you grant it the opportunity to do so. Additionally, this would mitigate the repercussions in the event that my assumptions were accurate. I transported the samples to Western New Mexico University and engaged in a discussion with a member of the science department. This occurred at a relatively early hour on Monday morning. They directed me to the department's chief, who expressed enthusiasm for the opportunity. I provided business credentials to all individuals who were involved in the sample production process, and I extended a 10% discount to them. It seemed as though he was appreciative. I had been contemplating the acquisition of a new vehicle to replace my Camry. It is possible that I will visit your establishment to examine the items you have in stock. I will collaborate with you to locate an item if nothing catches my attention, as I previously stated. He replied, "I will certainly remember that. Thank you very much." As I exited the university, I was aware that I was smiling, but it was tinged with apprehension. A negative test result could potentially end my marriage. When I discussed the purchase of new automobiles with Jenna, it was merely a ruse to conceal my unsettling thoughts. Nevertheless, the concept gradually ingrained itself in my mind. I extended an invitation to Paul, who functions as my accountant, loan officer, and occasional salesperson, to visit my office in order to discuss my intentions. I assured him that we will be able to resolve this effectively. I mentioned that there was an additional matter as I proceeded. I am interested in paying off my mortgage on my property. Is it possible for us to reach a consensus regarding a single payment? He responded by stating, "I will crunch the numbers and get back to you after lunch." While he was leaving, I was contemplating contacting my attorney to request a referral for family law. Nevertheless, I halted for a moment, convincing myself we should wait until we see the results. To date, I have not uncovered any tangible evidence of infidelity. Paul presented the spreadsheet immediately after lunch, and we discussed the next steps for both ideas. Each passing instant was filled with eager anticipation for the results of the DNA test, as the next 2 days seemed to drag on indefinitely. The director of the department contacted the individual in the late evening on Wednesday to affirm the outcome and schedule a meeting to discuss the automobile. Upon his arrival, I extended a warm welcome and escorted him to my office. His facial expression already communicated his emotions prior to his speech. He verified that the samples are not connected. Despite the fact that I had only partially anticipated the news, I nodded in agreement. There was a brief moment of hesitation before he handed over the envelope containing the results. I noticed that my demeanor had altered immediately upon returning my gaze to the ceiling. "I was interested in learning more about the vehicle you were considering purchasing." "I am considering purchasing a sports vehicle, despite the fact that it may sound like a cliché, as I have reached the significant milestone of 5.0. I concurred with the notion of a Mazda Miata. I resolved to examine the auction the following day for a well-maintained one, despite the fact that I did not have any in stock. I gave him the assurance that I will call him this afternoon with any new information as he was leaving. I thought to myself, knowing that Anna would not call, that I had informed her that I might go early, but that I would be approachable if it was necessary. It was hardly often that she needed my aid. Most of the tasks were undertaken by her alone. On my drive across the city, I noticed that everything appeared to be different. I contacted my attorney, who, despite being upset by the news, pointed me in the direction of a colleague in whom he had complete faith. In the aftermath of the call, I scheduled a meeting for the evening. The following day, when I was enjoying a snack at a restaurant, I pondered whether or not I had genuinely wasted the previous 15 years. Even if I were to say that I have a child from this marriage, I would be lying, in spite of the fact that she was not my biological child. I continued to think of her as my child to a certain extent. Now, what should we do? I was no longer able to pretend that I was ignorant. Up until this point, I had been aware of it, but now there was no going back. There was one thing I knew for sure: George would have to deal with the consequences. Despite the fact that he had been my closest buddy for many years, it was irrelevant. When he had friends like him, adversaries looked like a better option. Similarly, Jenna would be subject to consequences. I was curious as to whether or not she found out that Carrie was not mine. In spite of the fact that she was not, she concealed this information from me. The truth about her cheating on my husband on the day of our wedding with my best man, who was supposed to be my friend. At this point, I had no reason to question what I had just overheard. At the very least twice a month, she relished in his company. My anger started to build up inside of me, and I realized that I needed to be alone in order to prevent it from spiraling out of control, away from everyone else. My mistake was that I failed to phone Jenna and let her know that I would not be at home that evening. There was no way that they could go back home. I was terrified that I might commit an act that would result in my incarceration. The phone rang, and she answered it. "What's up, Kurt?" "To get ready for the auction that will take place tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I will be spending the night in Albuquerque." "Oh," I said in a resolute manner. "So, all right. I hope you have a safe journey." Due to the fact that I only occasionally went to Albuquerque for auctions, this aberration stood out to me. During the night, I was wondering if she would take advantage of my absence. In order to justify her actions toward Carrie to my parents, she would need to devise an explanation that would be difficult to express out loud. In spite of this, I would check her phone tracker at regular intervals during the evening to determine whether or not she had explored other locations. My goal was to purchase at least 20 automobiles, one of which was a Mazda Miata, so I drove to Albuquerque and negotiated the roads there. Following the auction, I would make arrangements for their pickup and delivery to my lot. Now, the problem was determining who should be responsible for their mechanical examination. As soon as George's existing routine inspections and repairs were completed, I was aware that I would not be able to provide him with any additional business. When I found out that I had purchased 20 automobiles, it is highly possible that he would visualize dollar signs and raise his prices. There was no way that was going to take place. It would be best if I kept it a secret until the very last minute. Before they were shipped to our little town, I wanted to confer with a local auction dealer in order to find someone who was responsible, knowledgeable, and trustworthy to inspect them. At approximately 9 in the morning, I arrived in Albuquerque and booked into a Best Western hotel. It was impossible for me to rationalize spending corporate money on a luxurious hotel, despite the fact that I was the owner of the business. Both the room and the bed were quite soft and comfortable. The exact thing I required. My wants are straightforward, and I am a common person. I instantly checked Jenna's phone tracker as soon as I entered the room, and I found out that she was still at home, or at least her phone was. Sleep was difficult to come by that evening. It was impossible for me to stop.